The Vexery Dominion had ruled the Orion Spur for 12,000 years, and in all that time, no species had ever stood against them and survived to tell the story. Their warships numbered in the millions. Their colonies spread across 10,000 worlds, and their name was spoken with fear in every corner of the galaxy when the scout fleet first discovered Earth, a small blue planet spinning quietly on the edge of known space. The commanders barely thought it worth reporting. The humans, as they called themselves, had only just begun to travel between their own planets, and their technology was laughably primitive compared to the great Dominion ambassador Kelthos Varn was chosen to deliver the message to these new creatures, and he considered it an insult to his status. He had conquered dozens of worlds and forced countless species into submission. Yet now he was sent to threaten farmers and merchants who could barely reach their own moon a century ago as ship. The Eternal Blade dropped out of hyperspace above Earth with an escort of 20 warships, and the humans scrambled their tiny fleet in response to Kelthos. Watched the human vessels on his display screen, and let out a sound that was something between a laugh and a growl. There were perhaps 40 ships in total. Small cruisers and outdated frigates that looked like they might fall apart if someone sneezed on them. Is this truly their entire defense force? He asked his tactical officer. Yes, Ambassador, the officer replied with amusement in his voice. Our scans show no other military vessels in the system. How delightful, Kelthos said as he rose from his command chair. Open a channel to their leadership. The transmission was sent, and within minutes, the faces of the United Earth Council appeared on the massive view screen. There were 12 of them, representatives from different nations and regions, and Kelthos could see the fear in their eyes, even through the transmission. They tried to hide it, of course, but Kelthos had seen that look on 1,000 different faces belonging to 1,000 different species. People of Earth, he began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I am Ambassador Kelthos Varn of the Vexery Dominion, and I come bearing a simple choice for your kind. The humans remained silent, watching him with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. You will submit to vassalage under the Dominion within 30 of your solar cycles. Kelthos continued. You will provide tribute in the form of resources, labor, and whatever else we require, and in exchange, we will allow your species to continue existing. One of the council members, an older woman with gray hair and tired eyes, leaned forward to speak. Ambassador, surely we can discuss this matter in a more civilized manner, she said, her voice shaking only slightly. Perhaps there is some arrangement we can reach that benefits both our peoples. Kelthos smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth that gleamed in the light of his bridge. There is nothing to discuss, he replied coldly. The Dominion does not negotiate with lesser species, and you would do well to remember that I am being generous by offering you any choice at all. Another council member, a younger man with dark skin and fierce eyes, stood up from his seat. And if we refuse? He asked, his voice carrying a hint of defiance that surprised Kelthos. Then your world will burn, the ambassador answered without hesitation. Your cities will be reduced to ash. Your people will be scattered to the void, and within a generation, no one will remember that humans ever existed. The council members looked at each other, and Kelthos could see them breaking. They whispered among themselves, their faces pale and their hands trembling. And he knew that victory was already his. We need time. The gray-haired woman finally said, Please, Ambassador, give us time to prepare our people for this transition. You have 30 cycles, Kelthos repeated. Use them wisely. He cut the transmission and turned away from the screen. Already bored with these pathetic creatures, set course back to the fleet staging area. He ordered his crew. And send word to War Master Koss that the humans have been given their ultimatum. As the Eternal Blade and its escorts jumped back into hyperspace, The humans watched them go with expressions that the Vexery interpreted as despair and defeat, but deep beneath the surface of what they had witnessed, something else was happening in a secure bunker far below the mountains of Switzerland. The true leaders of Earth's defense gathered around a table that held the most closely guarded secret in human history. Admiral Yuki Tanaka sat at the head of the table, her face calm and her eyes sharp as she studied the data flowing across dozens of screens. She was 63 years old, with silver streaks running through her black hair and scars on her hands from decades of service. Around her sat the commanders of humanity's real military force, men and women who had dedicated their entire lives to preparing for this exact moment. The Vexery have made contact, Admiral Tanaka said quietly. Just as we predicted they would. General Marcus Stone, a massive man with a voice like rolling thunder, nodded slowly. How long do we have? He asked. 30 days, Tanaka replied, though I expect they will grow impatient and attack sooner. Then we move forward with the plan, said Dr. Elena Vasquez, the chief scientist of Project Leviathan. Everything is ready, Admiral, and the Prometheus has been waiting long enough. Admiral Tanaka stood and walked to a window that looked out over a massive holographic display of the solar system hidden among the asteroids. Far from the prying eyes of Vexery sensors, a single marker blinked steadily. It represented humanity's greatest achievement and their only hope for survival. Send the signal, Admiral Tanaka ordered, her voice carrying the weight of 100 years of preparation. Wake the abyss. The message traveled across millions of kilometers of empty space, encoded in frequencies that no alien technology could detect, until it reached a hollowed-out dwarf planet drifting silently in the asteroid belt deep within that frozen rock. Lights began to flicker on in corridors that had been dark for decades. Machines that had slept for 60 years hummed back to life. And the greatest secret in human history began to stir. The Vexery had no idea what was coming, and by the time they realized their mistake, it would be far too late. Humanity had been preparing for this war since before the Dominion even knew Earth existed. And now the time had finally come to show the galaxy what humans were truly capable of achieving. The countdown to the Empire's greatest shock had begun. 60 years before the Vexery arrived at Earth, a young radio astronomer named Dr. Samuel Chen was working the night shift at a listening station in the mountains of Chile. He had spent most of his career searching the stars for signs of intelligent life. And like most of his colleagues, he had begun to wonder if humanity was truly alone in the universe. That night, everything changed. The signal came from deep space, weak and fragmented, but unmistakably artificial in its origin. Dr. Chen nearly fell out of his chair when he realized what he was looking at, and his hand shook as he began to record the transmission. It took months to decode the message, and when the translation was finally complete, the leaders of Earth gathered in secret to hear what it contained. The signal came from a species called the Korthan, a peaceful civilization that had flourished on a world 300 light years from Earth. They had built great cities and created beautiful art, and they had believed that the universe was a place of wonder and friendship. Then the Vexery came. The message was a warning, sent in the final hours before the Korthan civilization was completely destroyed. They will find you eventually. The translation read, the Dominion always finds new worlds to conquer, and they show no mercy to those who cannot defend themselves. The Korthan had included something else in their transmission, something that would change the course of human history forever. Hidden within the signal were schematics and technical data, the accumulated knowledge of a dying species given freely to whoever might receive it. There were designs for weapons and shields, for engines that could bend space itself, and for materials that did not exist in nature. The Korthan knew they could not save themselves, but they hoped that someone else might use their knowledge to survive. Where they had failed, The leaders of Earth faced an impossible choice. They could share this information with the world, but that would create chaos and panic on a global scale. They could ignore it and hope the warning was wrong. But deep down, everyone in that room knew that hope was not a strategy. Instead, they chose a third path in absolute secrecy. The nations of Earth put aside their differences and began the greatest construction project in human history. They called it Project Leviathan. And its goal was simple: build a weapon so powerful that even the mighty Vexery would think twice before attacking humanity. Dar Elena Vasquez was barely 20 years old when she was recruited into the project. A genius engineer plucked from her university and told that she would be helping to save the human race. She spent the next 4 decades of her life working on the Prometheus, watching it grow from concept to reality in the darkness between planets. The ship could not be built in any normal shipyard, because the Vexery had sensors that could detect large-scale construction anywhere in a solar system. Instead, the engineers came up with a plan that was equal parts brilliant and insane. They found a dwarf planet in the asteroid belt, a frozen rock called Erebus that was far from the prying eyes of any potential observers. Using technology adapted from the Corthan schematics, they hollowed out the interior of Erebus and began to build their weapon inside it. The Prometheus was not constructed in the traditional sense, but was grown using nanofabrication techniques that assembled the ship molecule by molecule. Hull was made from void-forged alloys, materials created in the absolute cold of deep space that were stronger than anything found on Earth. The engines were designed to fold space itself, allowing the massive vessel to move with speed and grace that seemed impossible for something so large. Weapons systems were reverse engineered from the Corthan data and improved upon by human scientists who refused to accept any limitation. The ship grew slowly over decades, hidden inside its asteroid shell like a butterfly waiting to emerge from its cocoon. Admiral Yuki Tanaka first saw the Prometheus when she was a young captain, barely 30 years old, and already marked for greatness by her superiors. She walked through the dark corridors of the unfinished vessel and felt something she could not quite explain, a sense of destiny that seemed to wrap around her like a cloak. "This is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," she whispered to Dr. Vasquez, who had become her guide and eventually her closest friend. "She is not just a ship," Elena replied with pride in her voice. "She is the hope of our entire species, built from the ashes of those who came before us." Over the years, Tanaka rose through the ranks of Earth's secret military, and she was eventually chosen to command the Prometheus. When the time came, she spent decades studying Vexery tactics, learning their patterns and their weaknesses, and preparing herself for a battle that might never come. Meanwhile, the project expanded beyond just the Prometheus, using the same techniques and hidden facilities scattered throughout the solar system. Humanity built 12 more capital ships, each one a masterpiece of engineering and determination. There was the Defiant, armed with kinetic accelerators that could punch through any armor ever created. There was the Vengeance, carrying enough fighters in its hangars to darken the skies of any world. There was the Resolve, designed as a mobile fortress that could withstand punishment that would destroy any other vessel. And there were 9 more, each one unique and each one deadly beyond measure. The visible fleet that humanity showed to the rest of the solar system, the cruisers and frigates that the Vexery would eventually mock, was nothing but a distraction. It was a mask worn by a species that had learned the most important lesson the universe had to teach. The galaxy was not kind to the weak, and survival required strength. Hidden behind a smile, 12,000 crew members lived aboard the Prometheus in secret, training endlessly for a battle they hoped they would never have to fight. They left behind families and friends, sacrificing normal lives for the chance to protect everyone they loved. Admiral Tanaka walked among them every day, learning their names and their stories. And she promised each one that their sacrifice would not be in vain when the signal finally came. When the words "Wake the Abyss" reached the sleeping giant in the asteroid belt, Tanaka felt tears running down her cheeks for the first time in years. She stood on the bridge of the Prometheus as the lights flickered on around her, as the reactors roared to life with the fury of a newborn star. And she knew that the moment of truth had finally arrived. All hands. "This is the Admiral," she announced over the ship-wide communication system. "The enemy is here, and our time has come." The crew moved to their stations with practiced efficiency, 60 years of preparation guiding their every action. The Prometheus stirred within its shell, ancient systems coming online one after another, and the asteroid called Erebus began to crack and split as something massive pushed against it from within. Humanity's secret weapon was waking up. And soon the Vexery would learn that they had made the greatest mistake in the history of their empire. They had given humanity time to prepare, and humanity had used every single second of it. War Master Draven Kos had conquered 37 worlds in his 3 centuries of service to the Dominion, and he considered the mission to Earth nothing more than a routine extermination. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Annihilator, surrounded by 400 warships that represented the full might of the subjugation fleet. Each vessel bristled with weapons that could level cities in seconds, and each crew was trained to follow orders without question or hesitation. "The humans have failed to respond to our ultimatum," his communications officer reported. "They continue to send requests for negotiation and pleas for mercy." Kos made a dismissive sound and waved his clawed hand through the air. "Of course they do," he replied with contempt dripping from every word. "They are weak creatures who cannot accept their fate, and they waste our time with their pathetic begging." He turned to his tactical display and studied the human defense fleet that had gathered near Earth. 43 vessels in total, ranging from small frigates to medium cruisers, and not a single one of them posed any real threat to his armada. "Order the fleet to advance," Kos commanded. "We will crush their defenders and then begin the cleansing of their world." The Vexery warships moved forward as one, their formation perfect, and their weapons charging for the battle ahead. The human fleet responded by moving to intercept them. A brave but utterly futile gesture that almost made Kos feel something like respect, almost, but not quite. The battle began with a volley of plasma fire from the Vexery weapons, and the first human ships exploded into clouds of debris and flame. The humans fought back with everything they had, their weapons scratching the shields of the Dominion vessels without causing any real damage. Ship after ship was destroyed, and the humans kept fighting, even as their numbers dwindled to nothing. Kos watched the destruction with growing boredom, disappointed that the conquest was proving to be so easy. "Is there truly no challenge to be found here?" he asked no one in particular. "I had hoped these creatures might at least provide some entertainment." His sensor officer suddenly leaned forward, her eyes fixed on her display with an expression of confusion. "War Master, I am detecting something strange in the asteroid belt," she reported hesitantly. "What kind of something?" Kos demanded impatiently. "I am not certain," she admitted. "There is a massive gravitational distortion forming approximately 300 million kilometers from our position." Kos frowned and turned his attention to the main view screen, where the last of the human defenders were being hunted down by his warships. "It is probably nothing," he decided. "Perhaps an unstable asteroid or a rogue comet." "War Master," the sensor officer said again, her voice now carrying an edge of fear. "The distortion is growing rapidly, and it is definitely not natural in origin." Before Kos could respond, something appeared on the view screen that made his blood run cold. The asteroid called Erebus was breaking apart, massive chunks of rock spinning away into space as something pushed through from inside it first. Kos thought it was an explosion of some kind, a catastrophic failure of some human mining operation that had triggered a collapse. Then the shape emerged from the debris, and he realized with growing horror that he was looking at a ship, but no ship he had ever seen was this large. The Prometheus cleared the remains of its hiding place and hung in space. Like a metal god awakening from an ancient sleep, it was 3 kilometers long, covered in armor plating that seemed to drink in the light around it, and irradiated power that made the sensors on every Vessery vessel scream in warning. "What is that thing?" Koss whispered, unable to believe what his eyes were showing him. "War Master, we are detecting 11 more gravitational distortions throughout the solar system," the sensor officer reported, her voice cracking with terror. "More ships are emerging." Across the solar system, humanity's true fleet revealed itself from hidden bases carved into moons and asteroids. From facilities buried beneath the ice of distant worlds, the ships of Project Leviathan launched into the void. The Defiant and the Vengeance rose from the moons of Jupiter, their hulls gleaming with weapons that had never been fired in anger. The Resolve emerged from a crater on Mercury, its shields already active and its crew ready for battle. 9 more capital ships appeared from hiding places that had fooled Vessery sensors for decades, and they began to move toward the enemy fleet with terrible purpose on Earth. Billions of people watched their screens in shock as they saw their true defenders for the first time. Many wept with relief and joy, finally understanding that they had never been as helpless as they had believed. Admiral Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and allowed herself a small smile as she watched the Vessery fleet scramble in confusion, open a channel to the enemy flagship. She ordered calmly. The communication was established, and Tanaka found herself looking at the face of War Master Koss. For the first time, she saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear that her people had felt when the Vessery first arrived, and she felt no sympathy for him at all. "War Master Koss," she said with ice in her voice, "I am Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the United Earthship Prometheus, and I suggest you withdraw your forces immediately." Koss stared at her image on his view screen, struggling to find words that would not come. "This is impossible," he finally managed to say. "Our sensors showed no evidence of these vessels." "Your sensors showed what we wanted them to show," Tanaka replied. "You looked at us and saw primitives who could barely travel between planets, and you never thought to look deeper. You cannot defeat the Dominion," Koss said, trying to regain his composure. "Even if you destroy my fleet, more will come." "Perhaps," Tanaka acknowledged. "But right now, your fleet is the one facing destruction, and I am offering you a chance to retreat with whatever ships survive the coming battle." Koss felt rage building in his chest, the fury of a predator who had suddenly become prey. "The Dominion does not retreat," he snarled. "Attack the human vessels. Destroy them all." The Vessery fleet turned toward the approaching human ships, and the true battle for Earth began. Admiral Tanaka watched the enemy formation on her tactical display and felt a strange calm settle over her. She had waited her entire life for this moment, and she intended to make it count. "All ships," she announced to the human fleet. "Weapons free, and may fortune favor the bold." The Prometheus surged forward, and the stars themselves seemed to tremble at what was about to happen. The first volley from the Prometheus struck the Vessery formation like the fist of an angry god, and 3 warships simply ceased to exist. There was no dramatic explosion, no slowly spreading fireball that gave the crews time to escape. One moment the ships were there, and the next moment they were nothing but expanding clouds of superheated atoms drifting through the void. War Master Koss stared at his tactical display in disbelief, unable to process what his sensors were showing him. Impossible. He whispered for the second time in as many minutes. The weapons that has destroyed his ships were unlike anything in the Dominion's vast database of military technology. They were kinetic accelerators of a design that should not exist, firing projectiles at speeds that approached a significant fraction of light itself. when those projectiles struck a target. They released energy equivalent to nuclear weapons, and no shield in the Vexery arsenal could stop them. Return fire! Ka screamed at his weapons officers. Concentrate all firepower on the largest enemy vessel. Hundreds of Vexery warships turned their weapons toward the Prometheus and unleashed a storm of plasma and missiles that should have overwhelmed any defense. The space around the human flagship lit up with explosions and energy discharges that would have vaporized a small moon, and when the barrage ended, the Prometheus was still there, completely undamaged and still advancing. Admiral Tanaka watched the attack wash over her ship's shields with an expression of calm satisfaction. The adaptive shield technology, reverse-engineered from Corthan data and improved by decades of human innovation, was performing exactly as designed. Every hit was analyzed by the ship's IA in milliseconds, and the shield frequencies adjusted automatically to become more resistant to each new type of weapon. The more the Vexery fired, the less effective their weapons became, and they had no way of understanding why. Helm, bring us into the center of their formation, Tanaka ordered. Weapons, prepare to deploy the swarm. The Prometheus accelerated with grace that seemed impossible for a vessel of its size, slipping between enemy ships like a predator moving through a herd of confused prey. Its point defense systems lashed out at passing vessels. Smaller weapons that would have been main batteries on any other ship, but were merely secondary armaments on this Leviathan Very. Ships burned and broke apart as the Prometheus carved a path through their ranks. And still the great ship pressed forward. Then the hangar bays opened, and the swarm was released. 50,000 fires poured out of the Prometheus in a river of metal and fury, each one piloted by a human who had trained for years for this exact moment. They were small craft, barely large enough to carry a pilot and a weapon system, but they moved with coordination that made them deadly beyond their size. The Vexery had nothing that could match them in speed or maneuverability, and their larger weapons could not track targets that moved so quickly. The fighters tore into the enemy fleet like a swarm of angry hornets, targeting engines and weapon systems with surgical precision. Ships that were not destroyed were crippled, left drifting helplessly as the human craft moved on to their next victims. Meanwhile, the other 12 capital ships of Project Leviathan had engaged the flanks of the Vexery formation. The Defiant lived up to its name, pushing directly into the heart of an enemy squadron and destroying everything within weapons range. Its kinetic accelerators fired in continuous volleys, and each shot meant another Vexery vessel reduced to debris. The Vengeance launched wave after wave of bombers that carried torpedoes designed to bypass shields and detonate inside enemy hulls. The Resolve absorbed punishment that would have destroyed any other ship, its reinforced armor and redundant systems keeping it fighting long after it should have been disbelieved. War Master Koss watched his fleet dying around him and felt something he had not experienced in 300 years of warfare. He felt true, absolute fear. We must retreat, his first officer said urgently. War Master, we have lost over 100 ships already, and the humans show no signs of slowing their attack. The Dominion does not retreat, Koss repeated, but his voice lacked conviction now. If we do not retreat, there will be no one left to report what happened here, the first officer argued. The Senate must know what we face on the bridge of the Prometheus. Admiral Tanaka monitored the battle with cold efficiency. She had studied Vexery tactics for 40 years, and she knew exactly how they would respond to each situation when they tried to concentrate their fire on a single human ship. She ordered the fleet to spread out and attack from multiple angles when they attempted to form a defensive sphere. She sent her fighters to create chaos within their ranks. Every move the enemy made, she had anticipated decades ago, and she had a counter prepared for each one. Admiral, her communications officer reported. Several enemy vessels are attempting to break away from the battle. Tanaka nodded slowly. Having expected this moment would come, activate the void anchors, she ordered. We cannot let them escape yet. The Prometheus and its sister ships activated a technology that humanity had barely understood. When they first discovered it in the Corthan schematics, void anchors were devices that could manipulate the fabric of space itself, creating regions where faster-than-light travel became temporarily impossible. The fleeing Vexery ships found their hyperdrives useless, their escape routes sealed by an invisible cage that they could not break through. They were trapped with the very enemy they were trying to flee, and their panic made them even easier targets. The battle raged for 4 hours. Though calling it a battle became increasingly inaccurate as time passed, it was a systematic destruction, a demonstration of what happened when arrogance met preparation and cruelty met determination. By the end, 377 Vexery warships had been destroyed, their crews lost to the void or captured by human boarding parties. Only 23 vessels remained operational, including the Annihilator, and they were surrounded by human ships with weapons trained on their hulls. Admiral Tanaka opened a channel to the enemy flagship one final time. War Master Koss, she said calmly, your fleet is destroyed, and your ship is at my mercy. Koss appeared on her view screen, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. Kill me then, he spat. I would rather die than face the shame of this defeat. I have no intention of killing you, Tanaka replied. I am going to let you go. Koss stared at her in confusion, unable to understand her words. Why? He demanded. Because I want you to deliver a message to your masters, Tanaka explained. I want you to tell them exactly what happened here, and I want you to make sure they understand that this is only the beginning. She leaned forward, her eyes burning with intensity that made Koss shrink back in his command chair. Tell them that humanity remembers every species they have destroyed, she continued. Tell them that we have inherited the knowledge and the fury of all those who came before us. And tell them that if they ever threaten our world again, we will not be content with merely defending ourselves. The void anchors deactivated, and the surviving Vexery ships fled into hyperspace, carrying a message that would shake the foundations of an empire. The 23 surviving ships of the subjugation fleet limped back to Dominion space, their hulls scarred and their crews broken in spirit. War Master Koss stood before the Vexery Senate 3 weeks later, his proud bearing replaced by the hunched posture of a defeated creature. The senators stared down at him from their elevated thrones, their faces displaying various shades of disbelief and fury. Explain yourself, demanded High Senator Vexus Prime, the eldest and most powerful member of the ruling council. How did you lose 377 warships to a species we classified as primitive? Koss had rehearsed his response 1,000 times during the journey home, but the words still tasted like ash in his mouth. They deceived us, he began, his voice hollow and tired. The fleet we observed was a distraction, a mask to hide their true capabilities. What capabilities? Another senator demanded. Our intelligence indicated they had barely achieved interplanetary travel. They have ships larger than anything in our fleet, Koss replied. Weapons that our shields cannot stop, and technology that we have never encountered in 12,000 years of conquest. The Senate chamber erupted in angry murmuring, senators turning to each other with expressions of shock and outrage. This is impossible, Vexus Prime declared. No primitive species could develop such technology in secret. They did not develop it themselves, Koss explained. They received it from somewhere, perhaps from the remnants of a species we destroyed long ago. You are telling us that the ghosts of our past conquests have risen to challenge us, a younger senator asked mockingly. I am telling you what I witnessed with my own eyes, Koss responded with a flash of his old fire. I am telling you that humanity is not what we believe them to be. He activated a holographic display, that showed recordings from the battle. Images of the Prometheus emerging from its hiding place and the systematic destruction of the Vexery fleet. The senators watched in silence as their warships burned and broke apart. As human fighters swarmed through their formations like insects, destroying a larger creature one bite at a time, the human commander sent a message. Kosh continued. She said that humanity remembers every species we have destroyed, and that they have inherited the fury of all those who came before. Threats from primitives, Vexus Prime scoffed, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. We will simply send a larger fleet. With respect, High Senator, Kosh said carefully. I believe that would be a mistake. You dare question the might of the Dominion? Another senator shouted. I dare to speak the truth, Kosh replied. We underestimated humanity once, and it cost us nearly 400 ships and their crews. If we attack again without understanding what we face, the losses will be even greater. The Senate debated for hours, their voices rising and falling as they argued about the proper response to this unprecedented humiliation. Meanwhile, the news of the battle spread across the Dominion faster than any official announcement could. Control rumors traveled through hyperspace communication networks, passed from ship to ship and world to world, until every corner of the Empire knew what had happened. A primitive species had defeated a Vexery subjugation fleet. A small blue world on the edge of known space had done what no one had accomplished in 12,000 years, and on hundreds of planets across the Dominion, subjugated species heard the news and began to hope. Admiral Tanaka knew that the battle was only the beginning, and she wasted no time preparing for what would come next. The Prometheus returned to Earth as a hero, greeted by celebrations that spanned the entire planet, but Tanaka did not allow herself or her crew to rest for long. The Vexery will return, she told the United Earth Council in a briefing 3 days after the battle. They cannot allow this defeat to stand, and they will come with a fleet 10 times larger than the one we destroyed. Then what do we do? The gray-haired councilwoman asked, the same one who had pleaded for time during the original ultimatum. We prepare, Tanaka replied. We expand our fleet, we strengthen our defenses, and we reach out to every species in the galaxy that has suffered under Dominion rule. You want to start a galactic rebellion? A younger councilman asked with surprise in his voice. I want to give hope to those who have none, Tanaka corrected him. The Dominion has ruled through fear for thousands of years, convincing everyone that resistance is futile. We have proven that it is not. She activated a display that showed a map of known space, with the Dominion's territory marked in red and Earth's tiny corner marked in blue. There are thousands of species out there who have been crushed under the Vexery boot, she continued. Worlds that have been stripped of their resources, peoples who have been forced into slavery, civilizations that have been reduced to nothing. They've been waiting for someone to stand up and show that the Dominion can be beaten. We are that someone, the council debated, as councils always do. But in the end, they gave Tanaka the authority she needed. A message was broadcast on frequencies that reached across the galaxy, transmitted from humanity's most powerful communication arrays to all species living under Dominion rule. The message began. This is Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the United Earthship Prometheus. You have been told that resistance is impossible, that the Vexery cannot be defeated, and that your only choice is submission or extinction. We are here to tell you that this is a lie. 30 days ago, the Dominion sent a fleet of 400 warships to conquer our world. Today, 23 of those ships limp home in defeat, carrying a message that we hope you will hear. The Dominion is not invincible, and you do not have to live in fear. We are humanity, and we were born from the void that the Vexery created when they destroyed countless civilizations across the galaxy. We carry the knowledge and the hope of all those who came before us. And we will not rest until every species in the galaxy has the chance to live in freedom. If you hear this message, know that you are not alone. Rise up, and together we will build a future that the Dominion cannot control. The message spread like wildfire through the galaxy, copied and repeated and passed from world to world on 100 planets. Rebellions that had been brewing for centuries finally exploded into action. Subjugated species who had accepted their fate for generations suddenly found the courage to resist. Inspired by the knowledge that somewhere out there, a small blue world had done the impossible, the Vexury Senate watched in horror as their empire began to crack at the edges. As worlds they had considered completely pacified erupted in violence and defiance. This is what you have unleashed. Vexus Prime hissed at War Master Kos. You should have died with your fleet. Perhaps, Kos admitted. But it would not have changed anything. The humans would still have won, and the galaxy would still have heard about it. We created this enemy ourselves. Aye, Senator, when we destroyed those who could have been our friends. Back on Earth, Admiral Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and watched the stars through the main view screen somewhere out there. The Vexury were plotting their revenge, gathering a fleet that would dwarf anything she had faced before. Somewhere out there, oppressed species were rising up and fighting for their freedom, inspired by a victory they had never expected to see. And somewhere out there, in the cold darkness between stars, the ghosts of the Korthan and all the other species the Dominion had destroyed were finally finding peace. Admiral, her first officer, reported. Construction on the new shipyard is proceeding ahead of schedule, and we expect to have 12 more capital ships completed within the next 2 years. Tanaka nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the stars. Good, she said quietly. We are going to need them. The first battle was won, but the war for the galaxy had only just begun. Humanity had announced itself to the universe, not as conquerors or destroyers, but as defenders and liberators. They had been born from the void, forged by the ashes of those who had fallen before them, and they would not rest until the job was finished. The Prometheus hung in orbit above Earth, a guardian watching over the world it had saved and the countless worlds it would fight for in the years to come. And in shipyards across human space, her sister ships grew stronger every day, preparing for a future that promised both terrible danger and incredible hope. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what humanity intended.